Hello everyone! Today's episode is about energy vampires, and I'm actually really excited to do this episode because I think I have a little bit of a different take on what to do about them. I don't know if you've heard about the term energy vampire. I know it's not a very kind term, but it actually describes quite aptly what some people do. I'm not sure actually, and I know I've heard the term like for decades, even before I knew about energy. So I'm not sure that everyone who uses the term energy vampire actually understands how energy works, and that's also why I wanted to do this episode. But as you know, this podcast, which is recorded every Monday at 7 o'clock on my page, my Facebook page called I Can Help You Thrive, is actually for business, and I want you to understand how energy vampires can affect your business, because at the end of the day, when you're an entrepreneur, energy vampires will affect your energy, and the less energy you have, the more difficult is going to be to run your business. You're going to feel exhausted, you're going to feel tired, you're going to lack the energy to actually do things, and it can actually impact your success. So I want you to understand that, and it's really important in business to understand about energy. So here we go. First, let's start with the definition of an energy vampire. So what is it? What is it? So for me, I come back to me, and as always as well, I haven't said this in this podcast, but I really want you to understand that take what works for you from what I say and leave the rest. It could be that what I'm saying doesn't resonate with you. It could be that you are not ready to hear it yet, or it could be anything. So I'm always very discerning on what I take on from other people. So if the term energy vampire really grates you, and everything I say in this episode doesn't feel right, then just don't listen to it, you know? So for me, what is an energy vampire? It's someone who drains you. So before I was aware of all this, there were people, when I came in touch with them, before I was with them, I felt very happy. And when I left them, I felt incredibly tired, exhausted, and sometimes even depressed. But I didn't put the two and two together. It was almost like there was a before and after, but I thought it was me. I thought I was a moody person. I thought, oh my God, Ange, why are you reacting like that? What's the matter with you? I never thought it was them. And I think that's why I'm doing this episode, so to help people become aware that if you have regular mood swings, if you have regular changes of energy levels, it could be that some people are using your energy without you being aware of it. And that's extremely important to understand. And I want to say one thing as well before we dig into the subject. Is very often when you're a natural healer, and you can be a natural healer and be a lawyer. That was me. I was a lawyer, and I only realized I was a natural healer when I walked into a psychic's office, where they don't have offices usually for a reading, and she just told me, she said, do people when they come to you say that they always feel better after spending time with you? And I said, yeah. And she said, but that's because you're a natural healer. So it happened when I was a lawyer. People would walk in my office, everybody would kind of tend to share their problems with me without me ever asking them, really. Well, sometimes I did, but I learned not to do too much, because then I would get overwhelmed with all these people who would come to me, and they invariably said, oh my God, I feel so much better talking to you. What I didn't realize, and it doesn't happen with everybody who shares their problem with you, by the way, I just want you to, this is just an anecdote. I want you to understand that there's an exchange of energy that can happen, and if these people are energy vampires, and we'll talk about who are the energy vampires in a second, then they will actually latch onto your energy and continue to use it after they leave your whatever, when you meet, whether it's the coffee place, wherever. And what I find as well, as a little intro, is that if you're a natural healer, you will naturally attract to you needy people who need energy, that will drain you. So it could even be in your relatives or your family or your friends, and that's the hardest one to manage, because then they impact the rest of your life. So I suppose I'm doing this to help you identify patterns that are happening in your life. Maybe you will become aware today by listening to this podcast that you are a natural healer. And in that case, that doesn't mean that you have to go and train as a healer. You can stay where you are. You can stay a lawyer by all means. If I had the tools back then as a lawyer to deal with everything that was happening to me, and I knew I could stay where I was and do good out of it, I would have done it. It's just that the workplace wasn't, it wasn't my destiny, I suppose. And the workplace wasn't supportive of that. But this is what I thrive for. I want really people to stay where they are and do the good that they do. One of my clients is a financial advisor. She's very sensitive. She's intuitive. And I love the fact that I train her to stay where she is so she can actually magnify her impact where she is, because healers are just not needed in their healing rooms. They're needed in the outside world. They're needed where difficult things happen. Sorry. They're needed, I was going to say in the real world. I don't mean to be obnoxious or anything, but this is where the healers are needed. So this is a bit the introduction to this podcast, but it could be that the person listening today is an accountant and has the problem that I'm describing, of people constantly coming to share their problems with them, etc., and they don't know how to deal with it, because at the end of the day they're absolutely exhausted. Or it could be you're a massage therapist and the same thing happens to you. You massage people, but at the end of the day you feel absolutely drained. So the first step is this awareness that this is happening, that you're not moody, that there's nothing wrong with you, that you realize that it's actually before or after you see people. Now, I'm going to share a little anecdote that happened to me after I trained in my Reiki 1 level. I'm trained to the level of master, and I've taught Reiki before. I don't do it anymore, but it's really part of everything that I do, because this has helped me to understand about energy on another level. And again, as I said earlier, even if you're in mainstream business, think about how you could add Reiki to your day, your life, to transform things so you understand better what's happening behind the scenes. Now, I had just trained in Reiki 1, and I was literally driving down the road, and it must have been an evening, because it was very quiet. There was hardly any cars around. And I suddenly felt depressed, like really, from one second to the other. And I think this anecdote is really important for you to understand how energy vampires work, because you don't even have to exchange a word with them. And so I was driving down, and the nearest route to me is called the A38. So I'm just going to keep that so it's simple for me to share this anecdote. And so suddenly I felt depressed and really awful, like this yucky feeling. And I thought, what is the matter with me? What's wrong with me? I stopped at the traffic light, and there was only one car that came from behind me. It was meant to be, when I started having this feeling, the car was probably 600 yards behind me. And when the car, I stopped at the traffic light. You know how you stop when it's like orange, not just when it's red, because you want to be cautious. You don't want to just run. And this is, I live near a very, very busy motorway interchange with lots of roads and everything. So I'm usually quite careful how I drive. I'm a careful driver anyway. Anyway, this person who was behind me got really upset that I stopped at the traffic lights, because they probably wanted to go through the red and I was in their way. So they literally came on the side of me, on my right side. I'm in England, so we drive the other way around from what I'm used to, and most people are. So they just went on the right hand side, pulled down their window, and started literally pouring insults at me for stopping at a traffic light. It was awful. The energy of that person was absolutely horrid. This woman was like, oh my goodness. And of course, because I've trained as a healer, I felt really bad for her. I thought, oh my God, for this person to be that awful to me just because I stopped at the traffic light, they must be in such a dark place. So I send them actually Reiki and healing, and I let them go their way. And the moment she drove past, as soon as the traffic lights turned green, and she had insulted me copiously, the moment she drove away from me, that dread, that feeling lifted instantly. Now, if you see from this story, I didn't talk to her. I wasn't in touch with her. I didn't even know she was there. And yet she affected my energy incredibly. Now, this is something I want you to be aware of. Not that I want you to get scared, but I just want you to understand that I suppose it's because I had just trained in Reiki 1, and that can increase the sensitivity. So it doesn't mean that you have to be afraid of coming out of your house or anything. I just want you to be aware. So who are these energy vampires? They can be anyone. That's the thing. It can be someone at the store. As you see, it can be someone on the road. It can be your grandmother. It was the case for me. I'll share an anecdote later on in this episode. It can be a friend. It can be a colleague. It can be a boss, an employee, just anyone around you. So what I want to explain is why do they do what they do? And then we'll get into the how, because I want you to understand this completely. Have this awareness of what is really happening, because you always have the power to stop energy vampires from using your energy. You do. It's just that until you know what they're doing, you can't really do anything, because you're a passive recipient of what they're doing. You don't really understand what's at play. So why do they do what they do? It's actually incredibly simple. They need energy. You have energy, and so they take your energy because you allow them to do it. Why do you allow them to do it? Because you don't know how to do it differently, because we haven't been taught, okay? So what I want you to, if there's one thing you take away from this episode, is that people do not need to know about energy to use your energy. Okay, it's not something that only happens to empaths and light workers or healers or whatever you want to call yourself. I'm not calling myself that at all, but it's something that happens all the time, every day, all day, to everyone. So these people do not have energy, and they use other people's energies to feel better. Yeah, and very often they do like this lady in the car. They will create an argument to literally suck your energy. That's why they're energy vampires. That's, I think, the word, even though it grates me a little bit, is very apt. They're hungry for energy. You have this beautiful shining energy, and you almost like have doors open, like, come and use me, please. And they come and use it. And that's it. That's as simple as that. There's no need to look into an evil scheme. There's no need to feel that they're bad people. They're unpleasant people, but they're not necessarily bad. They just need something. It's like if someone was hungry and you left your door open to your house with all that food lying around, you wouldn't complain that they come in and eat your food, because you left the door open and all these smells come out of your house, attracting them, and they just eat because they're hungry. I want to shift the energy around this energy vampire thing, because it's actually quite simple, and it's also quite simple to manage. So we'll talk about that through this episode. I want to give you an example as well with my grandmother. So we've had the driver's example. So that's someone completely that I didn't know, I will never know, and she still affected me. It's quite dramatic. I'm not saying that this is going to happen very often. I think what happened to me was meant to be to show me, the universe was showing me, look what can happen, so that I can share today. So that happened, I find it fascinating. That happened well over 10 years ago, and it is now useful today. Now so the example with my grandmother, she sadly she was a widow. So her husband died when she was in her 40s with 3 teenage children, and she met another man who was the love of her life later on. So I'm really happy for her. It was an incredible relationship. She traveled with him the world. It was like a second chance in life. And the day he died, sadly, he did die again. So she's had a lot of losses, my grandmother. She's in heaven now, so she's reunited with all her loves. And on that day, she came to visit my mum. She came for lunch. So we were all around the table with my dad, my mum, my grandmother, and my 2 siblings. I think we were fairly young, and she didn't say a word. She just walked into the room, and she told the story over and over how, because she observed what happened, even though she didn't say a word, all 3 of us kids were literally dropped, fell asleep at the table into our plates, from all the energy she sucked out of us. Well, she didn't put it that way. She didn't understand she was doing that. But that's exactly what she did. She literally sucked the life out of us because she was going through this incredible trauma. And she needed the energy. And she was an energy vampire anyway. God bless her. I know she'll forgive me for sharing these stories because I know she knows it's important to share this thing. I actually feel that she's behind this episode for people to understand, because I loved my grandmother dearly. But she was an energy vampire because she had no idea how to manage her own energy. She had never been told, and most people haven't. So there's no judgment in what I'm saying today. I want you to understand that. You know, energy vampires need all our love and all our compassion. However, we don't need to give our energy out to them without limit and for us to be depleted. This is where you need to draw the line. It's a little bit like if you have a lot of money and you know one of your relatives or friends doesn't have a lot of money, you don't like constantly give them money all the time, because it's not actually good for them. It keeps them into this cycle of dependency towards you, and you want them to learn how to make money for themselves rather than them just coming and say, oh my God, I don't have any money, can you give me some? That's exactly the same thing. You know, money is energy, so it's the same pattern that's happening. Okay, so I want you to understand that energy vampires are not evil. You know, they don't know any better. That's all. But at the same time, I want you to understand that you're always in control. It's for you to set your boundaries towards other people. It's for you to be strong, and don't be angry at them if they do what they do. They're just hungry for energy, and you're just giving it away freely, like there's no end to it. So how do you become an energy vampire? I wanted to dig into this a little bit. Usually it's through trauma, accident, depression, victim energy. But I want you to understand one thing though. It's very different from people who are going through trauma. Not everybody who goes through trauma is an energy vampire. What the energy vampires do is that they're negative thinkers. You know, they really see everything from a dark angle, and whatever you're going to throw at them, it's not even going to scratch the surface, because they have no desire, no will to change the way they look at things. They have no will to change who they are, how they do things. And that's very important to understand, because if you have a friend who's going through incredible trauma or challenge or difficult situation, or maybe it's your brother, or maybe it's someone at work, they might not necessarily be energy vampires. That's a very clear distinction that you need to make. They're just going through a bad patch, and you might be going as well. And we are supposed to be here for each other at these points in time. So it's very different, okay? I don't want to put everyone in the basket of energy vampires. Energy vampires have a really different energy that you'll recognize right away, because they're jealous. Usually they're in that victim energy of poor me, you know, the world is against me, if something's bad's gonna happen, it's gonna happen to me, that sort of thing. Whereas, you know, your friend who's going through a bad divorce at the moment might not be at all in that. She might be really a positive thinker, but she's still struggling and she needs your help. It's very different. Okay, I just wanted to make clear that, because so how do they take your energy? How do they use your energy? Mostly is through what's called energy cords. Okay, it's like hooks that they put in your energy. What I want you to understand is that once they hook into you, and you give the permission for them to hook you, and I'll explain to you how. You give the permission by feeling pity for them, by feeling bad for them, and that's enough for them to hook in. You literally give them permission. You've created the Velcro where they can come and stick. And what you need to understand is that these cords, these Velcro, these relationships will continue when then you're not with them as well. Energy does not know space and time. It literally is fluid and goes across boundaries of time and space. So that means that these hooks, these cords, and the more you give into this pattern, the stronger the cords become. I want you to really understand that. And so they are active even when you're not with that person. And that explains why sometimes you think of an energy vampire and suddenly just thinking of them, your energy drops. You've thought of them, you've given them their energy, they're using it, even though they don't know you're thinking of them. They will take it because you give it to them, because you give them attention. They're attention seekers, usually, energy vampires. Now, this is the one thing that might shock you. Energy cords survive death as well. And I had a client, actually, I had to remove the cords from her father into her energy years after he had died, because every time she thought of him, her energy dropped. He was still hooked into her. So it's important to understand. So where can these hooks happen? Now, I don't know if you know anything about the energy, your energy field. And I know some people don't resonate with chakras, but I'm going to just give them an idea where they can happen energetically so you understand why they hook. So the five main places where people usually hook other people is their throat, their solar plexus, their heart, their base, and their feet. And let's just have a quick look of why. They might hook your throat if they want to stop you speaking about something, because you know something about them that they don't want the world to know. So they'll hook into your throat and try and stop you from speaking, because they're afraid that you are going to get the cat out of the bag. I don't know if it's the right expression. Your solar plexus, that could be more like, and we're going back to business here, could be someone like your competitor. And they want to take your power away so that you don't, because they're afraid of you being in the same business as them. So it could be like a coach that does exactly the same thing as you do. And you think you're friends for a while and you get along fine, but then you don't understand why every time you talk to them, you feel your energy drops. And that person might secretly be incredibly jealous and threatened by you. And so every time they talk to you or even think of you, they hook into you and they hook into your solar plexus to try and stop you from being too successful. And that's not right. I want you to become aware of that. So just think in your mind, is there anyone, even a friend that you've been in touch with, could be a friend like you both want to lose weight and you're starting to lose weight and your friend isn't because she's not putting the effort in. And so every time she's with you, she's trying to sabotage your efforts. That's an energy vampire as well. Just be aware of that. Could be in your heart. Now that's more usually for romantic relationship, but it could be, the heart is also where the place of prosperity flourishes. So if someone's jealous of your money, how successful you are or how abundant you are, they might try to hook into your heart to close it down so that you don't get what you get. Your base, that's usually because they want to try and stop you from doing something that they find threatening. And your feet, it would be, again, I think it's more like a competitor kind of thing. It's someone who literally wants to stop you doing something. So if you imagine blocking someone's feet, they can't move forward, they can't do anything. And that can be incredibly powerful, and sadly in a negative way. So cords can and need to be removed. But I want to exercise caution here, because there's a way that's helpful to remove them and there's a way that is not so helpful. So if you feel comfortable, I actually started removing cords for my clients with no training at all, and it worked beautifully. I'm going to give you an example, and actually I read it in the book. I said, okay, the way to remove cords is to call on Archangel Michael, and he comes with his sword of light and he cuts the cord and everything. And I actually did that. So this is the story that happened that always moves me when I tell it. When I think of it, this woman came to me for a healing session. I was a healer back then, so I didn't work with businesses. So she had just run away from her abusive husband. She was in a shelter with 2 little kids, and she wanted to help her because every time she closed her eyes, she would see the face of her ex abusive husband pop in, and she just couldn't sleep. She was haunted by him, and in fact, he had sworn to find her. So she'd run away with her 2 little boys. She was far away from him, and she actually moved to a different part of the country where I was, so we met. And but she was haunted by him, and his energy was so ingrained in hers. And of course he was an energy vampire, which she didn't know, and I didn't know back then about how these things worked. But I had just read in the book that you could cut cords with Archangel Michael. So I said, well, let's try this, let's see if it works. I'm gonna have to cough. I don't really care. We have nothing to lose, so let's just do it. And so she was lying down on my massage table. I was doing a Reiki session on her, and so I removed the cord like it said in the book. She said, oh my God, he's gone, like in seconds, and he never came back energetically. So this is powerful, and if you feel that you want to try it on your own, please do. But I want to just say that I find in my own experience that removing cords for yourself is usually difficult because we have a blind corners, is that what you call it? Blind spots. So you might not think, like I wouldn't have liked to think that my grandmother was an energy vampire, so I would have never looked that way for a cord, if that makes any sense. And you could probably ask the universe or ask yourself, your higher self, to show you who has courted you. And then if you hear someone's name, or if someone pops from nowhere, like suppose you had a friend you hadn't talked to for 6 weeks, she suddenly picks up the phone, calls you, and you've just asked the universe to show you who has courted you, and it's completely out of the blue, then maybe you have a clue, okay? I don't want to mess up your friendship, but and again, as I said, they're not evil, and you can set boundaries, or you can decide, well, I don't really want to be with people like that. I don't really want to be friends with people who do this kind of thing. It's up to you. I've had to completely upgrade my friendships when I moved to the UK in 2001, because I was absolutely crippled and overwhelmed with the number of energy vampires I had in my life. It was like incredible. I just couldn't cope with it anymore. So I got a whole new set of friends. It can be traumatic, but sometimes it's important, because you realize that you've been wasting this time, literally managing other people's problems instead of getting on with your own dreams. And as an entrepreneur, you have to do that. You have to pursue your dreams. You're not here just to be, sorry, I'm coughing again. You're not here just to be someone else's crutch. And that's the problem with energy vampires. And you can get that as well when you're a healer. You can have clients who use you as a crutch. Be careful. Don't allow them to do that. So how can it affect your business? I think that's becoming quite clear now. It can affect your finances, even though it's not money that they get out of you, because it will make you feel tired. You will have clients that drain you. It could be, as I mentioned earlier, a competitor that envies you and that invisibly jinxes your business by hooking into you without you understanding, but you've given them permission because on some level you feel guilt or you feel bad for them. And when you do that, it's literally like opening the door. I feel bad for you, please come and get what I have. Yeah, it can be that employee that really resents you. They think that you're a horrible boss and everything you do, and they keep on moaning and whinging. Well, in that case, maybe you need to get rid of that employee, because even though you feel bad about them, again, you've given them permission because you feel bad, you have pity. Pity is a horrible feeling. I really don't like pitying people, because when you pity people, that means that you don't see them as powerful. You see them as small and disempowered, but that's not true. We're all empowered, and that's how we use our power that has the impact on other people's lives. So you can use your power to disempower people. You can use your power to empower people. That's the difference. So what they do, they affect your energy and your success. Now, the one thing that you can also do to help your energy levels is to stop watching the news and engaging in the newspaper drama, because that will affect your energy as well. These are energy vampires on paper or on TV. I don't even understand how people, and some books, I was actually reading a book about my ancestors the other day, and I suddenly started feeling awful. And it's not, I'm not criticizing or anything. This book was written by a man, maybe that was his energy, but I put the book down, and then I started feeling better, and then I realized it was the book I was reading. I was like, no, I'm not reading that book, I'm sorry. And funnily enough, this book had been gifted to me by my dad probably 30 years ago. I had never read it. It was sitting on my shelf and I didn't want to read it. And when I read it, I was sucked into that energy, that negative energy. It was awful. I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So since I've put it down, I've felt a lot better. So beware also of printed matter. Beware of Facebook. You see someone's post on social media, or it could be LinkedIn even. You see someone's post and suddenly your energy drops. You don't even have to engage with that person other than reading. And then if you start feeling your energy being dragged in when you read something that, very often it's a post that people will say about how bad life is for them, or they're going to talk about a drama, but their intent in sharing this is for you to feel bad for them. It's not to inspire you. There's a complete difference. You can share exactly the same story, and for one person it's going to be, the intent is going to be to inspire. For another, the intent is going to be to get attention. The people who want to get the attention are the energy vampires. Beware. That's all I'm going to say. So you need to learn to set your boundaries on an everyday level. What do you engage in? What do you give energy to? What do you give attention to? Where do you give away your power? Because even the news and the newspapers and the books, it's always someone's point of view. And if it starts to make you feel really depressed, pull away. You don't have to engage in this. You being depressed is not going to help someone else's depression. All it's going to do is to bring you down, and there'll be two people down. Does that make any sense? I hope it does, because my calling in business is to promote businesses that bring goodness to people, that uplift people, that make them feel better. And so this is why this episode is so important, so you understand that if that is what your calling is, to be a shining example, to be a shining light, to stand up, not be that tall poppy that can actually inspire others, but you get sucked in by all the people who basically don't want you to be that tall poppy, then you're giving your power away to them. You're giving the energy vampires literally your neck and your arms to come and serve themselves energetically. Does that make sense? I hope this episode was helpful. I don't want you to feel that I'm heartless. I actually, because I work with angels, every time I see someone like that, I just send them love and angels, and I just let them float away from me. I know someone else is going to take care of it. I know the angels are on the case because I've asked them to do that. And so it's not my job to save everyone. Otherwise, I'm not going to be doing what I'm supposed to do in this world, what I've come to do in this lifetime. And it's the same for you. So please, whenever you feel pity or guilt, observe it. Become aware. And know that this is like an open door for someone to come in and use your energy. Okay? This doesn't mean that you become heartless. What it means is that you don't feed them. Or you feed them, but only a little bit. And then you send them their way and say, this is how you can get more food, but not my food. Does that make any sense? So I have like 4 steps on how you can help energy vampires to help themselves, okay? Step number 1, don't engage in their negativity. So use distraction tactics. I use that all the time. I didn't used to, but I do that with my mum quite a bit. I wish I had known how to do that with my grandmother in her time, but I didn't. So that was a really good lesson. Step number 1. Step number 2, limit how much time you spend with them. So even if you have to invent an appointment, and this is what I had to do ultimately. If I knew I was going to spend some time with an energy vampire, I was like, okay, I'm going to give them 15 minutes. I'm going to say I have a dental appointment or whatever it is, make up something. I felt really bad about making up that appointment, but I would only engage with them knowing that there was something else that was going to stop. Because once you're in their energy, it's very difficult to pull out. It's almost like you're walking on trickle and you're like, oh, how do I get out of this? So set up a fictional appointment, or even a real one, or just tell your husband, look, at such time, call me to put an end to this conversation so I don't get dragged in. Okay, that's a very effective, or your wife, because I also talk to men in this episode. Number 3, let them know things that you will not tolerate, like complaining, gossiping, bitching. Yeah, this is like a big no-no. You walk out. If they do that, you walk out. I had to do that with my mother. I literally, at one point, I had to tell her, this is it, I'm not talking to you, and it lasted 2 years. It was very, very dramatic, but believe me, after those 2 years, when I was in touch with her again, she was a completely different person. And like, she hadn't changed who she was, but towards me, she knew that I meant business. So if I said to her, sorry, I don't want to hear about this, she was like, oh my God, is she gonna stop talking to me again? The boundaries were really clear. She had a clear message. Now, no, don't mess up with Ange. If you start your own old business, I'm out. It works wonders. So that was step number 3. Let them know what you won't tolerate and set really, really clear boundaries. And even if it means like maybe not 2 years, but like you don't talk to them for 3 to 4 weeks after an episode where maybe you had an argument, you made your case clear. I've had people say to me, this is who I am, you take me as I am, or you leave me. And I said, I'll leave you. I'm sorry. I'm not buying into that sort of thing. If you're playing that sort of game with me, I'm not in. I'm sorry. That's it. So step 3. Step 4, suggest ways that they can help themselves. Okay, so say to them, why don't you go and have a walk in nature? Why don't you get professional help? You know, these people can get professional help. You're not here to do that for them, especially when you're in business. You have something else to do. And if you're in the business of helping energy vampires, then they have an appointment, then they pay you, and then you make sure when you get to that appointment that you know what their tactics are and that you have this protection. And that's something else that I help some clients with, connecting them with their protector guide so that their clients don't actually suck them dry. Because at some point, if you don't do that, you will actually subconsciously not want to have too many clients in your business, because you know that it's going to drain you. So you can't actually have that many clients in a day, because after that you literally want to go to bed and you can't do anything else. That's really important. Understand that this is the issue. The issue is energetic boundaries. So suggest for them to go and get professional help. Maybe tell them, well, why don't you try meditation? Or tell them, why don't you go and watch a funny movie? Because watching funny movies or cat videos on Facebook lifts your energy. It's an instant lifter. Or maybe even suggest that they go and learn to play an instrument. You know, it'll distract their mind from all that negativity. You have ways to help them, show them the way. And if they don't do it, then you know that they don't want to change. And if they don't want to change, why do you keep them in your life? You know, that's a question that you really have to, because they are impacting your energy, probably your health as well, and certainly your success. So if this is the only invitation at the end of this podcast, is like, look at the energy vampires in your life, look how you can set boundaries, look how you can help them in a certain way by pointing them in the right direction, but you're not responsible for them. You're actually not helping them by always buying into their victim modes and dramas and arguments and bitching and gossiping and all that. This is not doing any good for you, nor is it doing any good for them. In a way, you're taking, if you want to talk spiritual, you're taking on their karma. Yeah? You're taking on their crap. I'm sorry for the word. I'm trying to keep relatively clean in this podcast. And you don't want to do that. It's not yours to take. It's not your problem. Leave them with their problem. Give them pointers, but don't take their problems on. And I can say this even more strongly because I've done this for decades. I used to be the specialist of energy vampire and all of this. I have a badge, yeah? The energy vampire saver. Whatever it is. And I was trained very young. I had a grandmother and a mother who were both energy vampires. So it was almost in my child, you know, anything that happens in your childhood is deeply ingrained. These are lessons last for life. So I hope you found this episode helpful. If that's the case, I would love for you to write a review and a rating for my podcast. And I will see you next week for the next episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.